Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Study Circle, HISC Seerah session 223. Inshallah, this will be the last one where we talk about the Seerah in chronology. We'll might do some recaps over the next couple of sessions, inshallah, and then we'll go on to some aspects of the Prophet's life, such as his leadership qualities and his aspects of his personality that we can learn from. And so again, this is the culmination of the second time we've gone through the Seerah of the Prophet as a Harborne Islamic Study Circle. This particular session we started back in middle of May 2016, and we've had a couple of short breaks, but alhamdulillah, we've come to the end, 223 sessions discussing the Seerah in various lengths and details. So thank you all for being part of the journey. Thank you everyone who's been part of this, given some feedback, come to the study circles or listened online. Inshallah, there is a barakah in that for all of us, inshallah. We get closer to the Prophet ﷺ, we get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we improve ourselves through this journey. And it's a constant journey. And next time, when we go read back the Seerah, inshallah, we will learn more and deeper aspects and different things. So I'm thankful of Allah for allowing me to study and teach aspects of the Seerah in this way over these many years. May Allah accept it from me, inshallah. All the good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and any mistakes that there have been throughout these years, they are obviously mistakes from myself, and I ask Allah for forgiveness in those aspects. And again, thanks everyone for being part of that journey and all the feedback that we've received. And again, I thank Allah for all the benefits that have come from this, all the spin-offs, all the side projects that have come from my efforts through the study circle in interacting with everybody here. So without further ado, let's go on and talk about this particular session, which is the burial of the Prophet ﷺ. But before that, quick recap of last session, 222. The Prophet ﷺ passed away on Monday, the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, the 11th year of al-Hijrah, in the house of Aisha, adjacent to the Prophet's masjid. We talked about how panic, shock, and grief gripped the Muslim community, who had earlier dispersed from the mosque, from the vigil in the mosque, because they saw the Prophet ﷺ at Fajr time and they thought he was getting better. And so much so that when Umar came back from the army that was stationed outside with Ussamah, he was in complete shock and disbelief. And he was saying, I'm going to, don't anyone say that the Prophet has died. He's not died. He's just in a coma, etc., etc. But then when Abu Bakr came back, he went straight to the Prophet's body, kissed him on the forehead, and then addressed the people in the mosque, told Umar to sit down, and basically gave that famous saying where he said, "He who worshipped Muhammad, know that Muhammad is dead, but he who worships Allah, know that Allah is ever living and never dies," and then quoted a verse from the Qur'an that talked about, if the Prophet ﷺ were to die, would you then leave Islam? And again, that really hit home, and people then had the realization that the greatest human being to have lived has finally passed away. And then when Umar heard that, and when it hit home, he just collapsed. He says his legs gave way under him. Then we talked about how the household of the Prophet ﷺ, Ali, Zubair, Talha, were with the body of the Prophet ﷺ. And then again, in a state of shock and disbelief, the Ansar, the Aus, and the Khazraj, they assembled at a known meeting place, and one of their sort of traditional meeting places, the Khalifah of Bani Sa'ida, and there lots of discussion amongst their grief, and then they were inclined to nominate Sa'd ibn Ubadah to lead Muslims. Abu Bakr heard of this, and then he grabbed Umar ibn al-Khattab and Abu Ubaidah and no doubt a few others. They went to the Saqifah of Bani Sa'ada, and they were having a long discussion, and it got quite heated in places, and it went on through into the late hours of the night. It wasn't just something that happened, over a few minutes. There was lots of toing and froing, and Abu Bakr in the end then nominated Umar and Abu Ubaidah, that the Ansar should choose between these two. But then Umar said, look, there's no way I'm going to be leading any congregation that has Abu Bakr in it. So he said to Abu Bakr, you stretch out your hand and I pledge my allegiance. And then all the other nobles that were gathered, they then likewise pledged their allegiance. And again, we said we would talk about this being an evidence of Ijma-as-Sahabah. So that was the topic of the secession of the Prophet. And again, it's important to realize that there's a lot we can learn from that. What we do know is that the Prophet ﷺ did not explicitly say who should lead him after he died, but he left principles in place that all the Sahabi knew of or were in agreement to, or none of them disagreed with those principles. And some of the principles are the fact that it should be someone from the Quraysh. There was discussion around that. And other aspects. But one other thing that we can learn from this is that there is a time period of 3 days where it is imperative that the Muslims choose a successor, a Khalifa, to look after the affairs of the Ummah. I mean, we'll touch upon some of the disagreements between what we now see as the Sunni and the Shia around who should be succession. I'll come on to that later on. But we can see that the strong and majority opinion at the time was in favor that Abu Bakr should be the Khalife. And we've previously talked about some of the Ashra Mubashara, some of the instances where the Prophet ﷺ has had dreams or he's mentioned things which go into in the. I mean, the famous one is where he sat on the well, and then they're sort of in a sort of barn type area, and somebody knocks on the door, and the Prophet tells the servant, see who that is. If it's Abu Bakr, give him the glad tidings of Jannah and let him come in. And it was Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr sat with him on the well. And then another knock on the door, and same thing, the Prophet, if it's Umar, tell him, give him the glad tidings of Jannah and ask him to come. And then it was Umar, and they sat together on the other side of the, Umar sat on the other side of the Prophet on the well. Another knock on the door, and the Prophet said, if it's Uthman, give him the glad tidings of Jannah and allow him to come in. And again, he came in and sat in. He said, look, there wasn't enough space around the well, so he sat on the adjacent well. And so, and there's other occasions as well where the Prophet talks about things which we can see in hindsight is around succession. One where they're pulling water out of a well, and the Prophet had a dream, and he was pulling some water out of the well, and it was some water was coming out. And then I saw Abu Bakr pulling the water out, but it was sort of it was a bit tough for him to pull out, and he pulled out a bucket or two. And then Umar ibn al-Khattab came along, and he pulled out sort of gallons of water. It came gushing out, so much so that even the animals came and had the water. And again, just an indication that after him there'll be Abu Bakr, and then in the Khilafah of Umar ibn al-Khattab, things would really be quite prosperous. And again, there's lots of other these hadith which we don't need to go into now. It's not the time or place, and we'll probably talk about that later on. And all the while, Ali, because he is Ahlul Bayt, he is sort of one of the senior figures in the household of the Prophet ﷺ, along with al-Abbas, who's more senior to him, but they are the close family of the Prophet ﷺ. They saw their purpose as looking after the household affairs once the Prophet ﷺ has died. And again, they weren't sure what to do, and we'll come on to that in a second. But just in terms of this thing that we all know that burying the Muslim is imperative as soon as you can. So when somebody passes away and returns to Allah, the burial should take place as soon as is practicably possible, and it shouldn't be delayed. Yet we see here the death of the Prophet, the most important person in human history, his death. Everybody recognized, they agreed, there was an ijma on this, a consensus, that until the successor is chosen, that obligation of the burial of the Prophet was superseded by the more important obligation to have a unified political leader for the Muslims, and that's and we see that not just when the Prophet died. When Abu Bakr as-Siddiq he died, he recommended that Umar take over, and then when Umar ibn al-Khattab was poisoned and he was dying, he nominated 6 people, and amongst the 6 were those who were guaranteed paradise, the Ashra Mubashira. And of those 6 people, he said, put these 6 people in a room, give them 3 days to decide who should be the next Khalif amongst themselves. And if any of them disagrees, kill them, right? So you lock these 6 people. If any of them objects or disagrees with one person, kill them. And again, these are the Ashra Mubashra. These are people who have guaranteed paradise. So again, it shows, you got the 3 days, and there is a choice. And then, the 6 couldn't decide amongst themselves, so they took it to the people of Medina and said, who do you want? We've got Ali and Uthman as 2 of the favored candidates. And the people said, look, we want somebody to continue the same sort of ruling as Abu Bakr and Umar. And so they offered those conditions to Ali, and he says, look, I want to bring in some of my own ideas, my own way of doing things. And so he declined to accept those conditions. So they offered it to Uthman. He says, yes, fine, I'll accept. And again, so you see, you have these 3 days on, and again, the scholars have said that, the Ummah cannot last more than 3 days without a Khalif. And throughout all of human history, apart from a short period of time when the Mongols invaded, we've always had a Khalif up until 1924. People are aware that the the Ottoman Empire, was abolished by Kemal Ataturk. But the important thing there is recognizing Ijma-as-Sahabah as a precedence, as a legal precedence, and how we should do things. And again, we take that as a source of legal opinion for us. So we had an agreement amongst the nobles that were there in the Saqifa of Bani Sa'da. We had an agreement that Abu Bakr should be the Khalif, and they'd given him bayah. And that discussion, because the Prophet he died earlier on in the day, that went on through the night, and then it was getting to Fajr time. So now people are heading to the mosque to pray Fajr, and obviously, because Abu Bakr was nominated by the Prophet ﷺ on his deathbed to lead the prayers, it was obvious that Abu Bakr Siddiq would lead the prayers. Again, that's irrespective of him being Khalif. So the people are gathering at dawn, Fajr time, before the prayers, and then Umar, he got up and he addressed the people in the masjid. And again, he has to clarify some of the wild stuff he was saying yesterday. So he then told the people, I expected that the Holy Prophet ﷺ would outlive us all, but it was the will of Allah that after having fulfilled his mission, he should return to Allah. So this was his own understanding. And again, we talked about he had another understanding where that he understood the Prophet ﷺ would deal with all the munafiqeen before he goes. So Umar then continues, verily the Prophet came from God, and to God he has returned. And he has left us with the Holy Qur'an, from which we can always receive guidance. And he says, the things that I said yesterday, they were from me, they were not from revelation, they were not from anywhere else. So he is taking personal ownership of the things that he was saying, and he's making it clear that this was his mistake, and he's making this public sort of contrite apology. And then he goes on to say, we have in our midst Abu Bakr, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, the second of the 2 in the cave, quoting the Qur'an, who is undoubtedly the worthiest amongst us to conduct our affairs, to strengthen his hands and to maintain the integrity of the Muslim community. It is necessary that we should repose our confidence in him and offer him our allegiance, our bayah. Now come and offer bayah allegiance to him. So those nobles that hadn't already done it, they all came and they grabbed the Abu Bakr by the hand one by one, and they offered their allegiance to him. So that was the physical gesture of offering allegiance to Abu Bakr and saying, I will agree to obey you in Islam. Obviously Ali didn't offer his bayah at that point in time because he's looking after the body of the Prophet. So he's not there, and we'll talk about, some say he offered it later on, some say he didn't, and some say it was much later on. But what we do know is that he did give his pledges allegiance to Abu Bakr once things had settled down. So this is how the new leader, the deputy, the Khalifa, was appointed. Abu Bakr, he stretched out his hands, and the Muslims in the mosque filed past him one by one, and touching his outstretched hand as a mark of allegiance. And the Prophet, Abu Bakr Siddiq, he didn't stand on the pulpit where he stood on the mimbar, but the Prophet would normally stand on the highest step of the mimbar. But Abu Bakr, he, out of respect, didn't stand on the highest. He stood one step down. Again, showing that he's the deputy, he's now taking over, but he will never assume that position. And after that, solemn ceremony of pledging bayah, the Prophet, then Abu Bakr, he addressed his inaugural address to the Ummah. He says, look, I have been given authority over you, and I am not the best of you. Very humble start. If I do well, help me. And if I do wrong, set me right. And he goes, I've never sought this position, but it has been offered to me. If I do well, help me. If I do wrong, set me right. Sincere regard for the truth is loyalty, and disregard for the truth is treachery. The weak amongst you shall be strong with me until I have secured his rights, if God wills. And the strongest amongst you will be weak with me until I have wrestled from him the rights of others, if Allah wills. Obey me as long as I obey Allah and his messenger. But if I disobey Allah and his messenger, you owe me no obedience. Arise for your prayer, God have mercy upon you. And then he led the salah. So that is the formal transition of Abu Bakr as the first Khalif. So let's then move on to the burial preparations of the Prophet ﷺ. All of that discussion happened on Monday evening into the night, and now it's Tuesday Fajr time in the morning when they've just prayed Fajr. And during that time, the Prophet ﷺ's body has been sort of laying on his bed, covered in a garment, and sort of locked in that room with his close family around him. So then the next day, the Tuesday, after they've sorted out the secession, people are gathering. Well, how do, and this is the house of the Prophet al-Bayt, how do we wash the Prophet? I mean, he's not told us explicitly what to do. And so they're not sure what the hukam is in terms of the burial rites of the Prophet ﷺ. And so there's just looking at each other. And in the room, there's the immediate family, al-Abbas. Al-Abbas's two sons, al-Fadl and al-Khutam, and Ali ibn Abi Talib. And then they're sort of discussing, well, how do we wash the body? And then it said that as they're discussing, sleep overcame all of them. And in their sleep, they heard a voice that said, wash him with the clothes on. And then they all came back from their sleep, and they recognized that this was Jibreel alayhi salam, who told them to, not to undress the Prophet, but to wash him over his clothes. So they washed him with the Prophet, had his clothes on, and that's the right, most befitting way to do it, obviously. But they were obviously looking for an indication of how to do it. So it said that he was washed by al-Abbas, Ali, al-Fadl, and Khatam, and the two sons of al-Abbas. And also in the room, there was one of the Prophet's freed slaves, Shakran, and other versions say there's also Ussamah bin Zaid, and somebody from the Aus called Aus bin Khawli. And he sort of knocked on the door and said, by our right, or can we have a right over this process, as being from the Aus, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, he allowed him to come in. So al-Abbas and al-Fadl and Khatam, they turned the body round, and Usama and Chakran, they're the ones that poured water over the Prophet's body, and Ali washed him, and it was the Aus who had the Prophet leaned against his chest. And then it said that they shrouded the Prophet with 3 white garments, and these garments were from a particular part of Yemen called Suhul, or Suhuli garments, and they didn't put any turban on the Prophet, nor any headcloth, and nor any casing. Then the discussion, now that they've washed him, is, well, where do we bury the Prophet? And then again, they're having this discussion. Some say that they should bury him in Jannatul Baqi, in the graveyard. Others suggest, well, he should be under the mimbar, where in the masjid. Some say where he used to pray in the masjid, that is the befitting place for him to be buried. And then Abu Bakr said, look, and whilst they're having these discussions, I remember hearing that the Prophet told me, Allah never takes a soul from a prophet except at the place where Allah wants him to be buried. And again, we mentioned this years ago when we talked about how Musa Islam was taken up to heaven on his way back, in the Holy Land. So all the prophets are buried where they died. So he is buried under the place where he slept, right? And so the grave was dug there where he was buried. And it said that Abu Talha lifted the bed on which where he had died and started digging underneath and cutting the ground to make the tomb. Nobody led the janazah prayer. And again, they were all agreed that there shouldn't be a janazah prayer as such, with one imam leading it. And so what they did, people entered into that. It's a small room. It's a tiny room, the room of Aisha. And we've talked about how tiny it was before. People entered in. You can only get in a handful of people. So people came in 10 by 10, and they all individually, prayed for the Prophet ﷺ. And the first people to pray were his clan, his tribe. Then the Muhajir prayed, then the Ansar, and then the women prayed after the men. And then after the women, the young came and prayed. So the entirety of Medina, plus some of the surrounding loyal tribes, they all came and they all filed through that small room and prayed for the Prophet ﷺ. And that essentially took all of Tuesday and Wednesday into the night, right? So Wednesday, late into Wednesday, after it being dark, they are coming in, offering their prayers. Tens of thousands of people, no doubt, all prayed in that small room of Aisha. And then Wednesday evening, as we said, they started. It said, Aisha said that we didn't know that the Prophet was being buried until we heard the sounds of the tools digging the ground at the depth, to the depth on Wednesday night, and that's when it really hit home that he's going to be put into the ground. And again, another trauma for all the Muslims. And again, it's just part of that sort of a trauma and dealing with the death of the Prophet. When Fatima, she entered the room again and she saw the grave where the bed used to be, and she turned to Anas ibn Malik, one of the Prophet's servants, and sort of said, "Look, how could your souls have allowed you to throw dirt, sand, on the Prophet ﷺ. So again, she's obviously still in distress, but again, it's just bringing that finality to the going away of the Prophet ﷺ. And Anas later says, look, the day the Prophet ﷺ, he entered into Medina was the brightest day of our lives. And we talked about how he came in from Quba, and he had the 12 Nuqaba around, stationed outside, and he entered into Medina. And the followers of the Prophet ﷺ were obviously very, very happy that he was there. He'd taken over and he's now in charge. And he said that was the brightest day of our lives. And the day we buried him was the darkest day of our lives. And again, Anas said, after we buried the Prophet ﷺ, Medina had become dark for us. If one would extend our hand out, we couldn't see it. Right? And it's not talking about the fact that they lost their vision or it's really dark. It's just the sense of depression and melancholy that they have, that they just aren't orientated properly, and that's a way of expressing that disorientation after the Prophet ﷺ died. Things had just become so dark for them, it's like a depression and shock. It hit all of the people, right? And he goes on to say, and by the time we buried him, we could not even recognize ourselves. Again, just complete sense of emptiness and being bereft. So the companions, again, it said that they started rebuking each other in this time for crying, but then they would start crying themselves, so stop crying, and then they're crying, and then stop crying, and again, there's just this sense of collective grief. And on one occasion, Abu Bakr and Umar went and they met with Ayman, and she was crying, and they said, well, why, saying, well, why are you crying? And she said, look, not for him do I weep, but know I not that he has gone to that which is better for him than this world. So I'm not crying because Prophet has died, because he's in a better place. But she says, and this is really, I mean, when I first heard this, has really hit me home. And she said, but I weep for the fact that the tidings from above the seven heavens have been cut off from us. Because whilst the Prophet was alive, there was a sense that there was a physical connection between where they live, this human plane, and Allah above the seven heavens. Now the Prophet ﷺ has died, wahi is finished. There's no more revelation. And that almost like umbilical cord between above the heavens and us mortals here on earth, that's been severed. And that sense of disconnect and being set adrift, and that's what Ayman was getting across, that we had that connection with Allah, that almost physical connection with the Qur'an coming down. Now there will be no more revelation, there will be no more Qur'an. And that is, that door has closed. And she's weeping for the sense of loss around that. And again, we need to remember the Prophet ﷺ, he reminds us, and this is for us, the Prophet ﷺ said that what have I to do with this world? I and this world are like a rider and a tree beneath which he takes some shelter. He rests there for a while, and then he goes on his way and leaves behind the tree. And that is life for us. It's that journey. And we're here for a short period of time, and then we move on to something better, right? And know that, the Prophet ﷺ said that I go before you and I am your witness, and your tryst, your meet with me is at the pool, al-Kawthar. And that's what we have to look forward to, inshallah. So just one final thing to mention, I just need to mention it here, not sort of overlooking it, but obviously there's the sectarian differences that arise from the secession of the Prophet ﷺ. You have the Shi'a Ali, the party of Ali, the group that is aligned to Ali, who felt that Ali ibn Abi Talib should have been the first Khalife. And it's a legitimate political point, a view. And it is that. It's just a political point of view. Some of the people, whether it's for tribal reasons or other reasons, think that Ali should have been the first Khalif. But there was, agreement, ijma amongst the companions that they should offer allegiance to Abu Bakr. And, we mentioned that Ali himself offered allegiance to Abu Bakr and recognized Abu Bakr as the Khalifa. I mean, there are some accounts which aren't that strong, which say that Ali did not offer allegiance, but or that he opposed Abu Bakr, but they're very weak. But the stronger opinions are that he did offer allegiance to Abu Bakr, and some say that he offered allegiance some months later, 5 or 6 months later, after the death of Fatima, the Prophet's daughter, and his wife. Once when she'd passed away, he offered allegiance to Abu Bakr. But what we cannot deny is that Ali had given allegiance and also recognized Abu Bakr as the Khalif. He was associated with the administration of the Khilafah of Abu Bakr. He did errands and chores on behalf of Abu Bakr. And when Abu Bakr Siddiq passed away, Ali gave some very flowery, hard-hitting prose and poems where he highlighted the superb qualities of Abu Bakr and had expressed his full faith in the leadership of Abu Bakr Siddiq. And more so, Ali then went on to marry the widow of Abu Bakr Siddiq, Asma. And Abu Bakr and Asma looked after the son of Abu Bakr, Muhammad, and Ali looked after him as his own. And there's some lovely hadith about sort of some banter between Ali and Asma around these things. But again, it just shows that they had this strong relationship, and in the time, and even if there was a disagreement, things were reconciled, during the time of Abu Bakr. And then, so the election of these leaders, the appointment of the leaders, it was nothing but a political thing, right? And it's not a religious thing in the outset. There's a legitimate disagreement who should be, who they think should be the best to take over. And then it was agreed that it should be Bakr, and that's how it was. Later on, there was a legitimate disagreement between, Ali and Muawiyah. And so you had different camps, right? You had the camp of Ali and you had the camp of Muawiyah. And they had a legitimate disagreement. In the disagreement, and again from indications, we know that Ali had the stronger, more rightful position. And Muawiyah, again, he had firmly held positions, but he was allowed to have those, but they were weaker than Ali's. But people, they sort of had they were on both sides. What we find later on is that though from some of the Shia Ali later on, anybody who had opposed Ali in the other camp, they would then not take them as being reliable or trustworthy or historically not to take anything from them. And then because you then restrict such a vast number of hadith that are narrated through those people, you obviously have a much smaller pool or a different pool for your sharia, for your hukms, and that's why, based on that, you may get a difference of interpretation based on the fact, that you have this, seemingly originally political difference, then turning into a religious or theological difference much later on. But what we do know is that Abu Bakr, when he took over, he had a tough time because he had to deal with the wards of Ridda, the apostates, people who, once the Prophet ﷺ had passed away, said, "Look, we're no longer going to be Muslim. We're no longer going to give you zakah or other aspects." And so Abu Bakr was consolidating the belief amongst the people and fighting the false prophets like Musaylima al-Kadhab. Then after Abu Bakr died the same age the Prophet ﷺ when he died. Then Umar ibn al-Khattab took over, and again, we know that was like a golden era where they conquered vast amounts of territory, brought it under Islam. And the conquest of Persia, that had been stronger than the Roman Empire for many centuries, gone within a decade, right? Completely wiped off the face of the earth. And again, we know because the Khosrow, he tore up the letter of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet said, as he tore up my letter, so Allah will tear up his kingdom. Then after Umar, we got Uthman, and again, one of his proudest legacies was to consolidate the Qur'an as a singular, unified book, and that's where we get and we talked about that when we talked about the Qur'an. And then obviously Ali came after that, and there's lots of political and internal strife. But that, again, inshallah, we'll talk about that later on. But just in conclusion, and again, I didn't want to miss just talking about that. In conclusion, just want to say thanks, everybody. Thanks to Allah Almighty, obviously. All mistakes throughout this presentation and previous study circles all mistakes of mine, and all glory and all blessings to Allah. And we've talked about the blessings of the Prophet ﷺ, the trials that he's faced throughout his life. And we recognize that he is the greatest human ever to have walked on this earth. And we thank Allah that he chose the Prophet ﷺ to be our guide, right? And Allah chose from his entire creation this one man, and he has become our guide. And he has blessed us, with his example. And we thank Allah for making us of the ummah, that follow that example. We thank Allah for making us of that, the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. And we ask Allah to allow us to see the Prophet ﷺ on the Day of Judgment and to seek his intercession on the Day of Judgment. We want to see him physically, go to him and to have the drink from al-Kawthar from the hands of the Prophet ﷺ, right? When he invites us on the Day of Judgment, when he sees the mark of belief on our faces, recognizes and calls us over and personally gives us some water from the fountain, after which we will never be thirsty ever again. We ask Allah to allow us to be with the Prophet ﷺ in Jannatul Firdaus and to meet him and spend some time with him. And why wouldn't the Prophet ﷺ want to spend some time with us? He's got for all of eternity afterwards. We can, schedule some time and meet the Prophet ﷺ and spend some time and asking some questions and learn some more from the greatest human that has ever been. And because of our love for him, we ask Allah to forgive us our mistakes, and make us from those who practice the Sunnah. We ask Allah that because of our love of the Prophet ﷺ, to raise us to be with him and to be with the Sahabi, and to forgive all of our sins. We ask Allah that he accepts all of our efforts as followers of the Prophet ﷺ, and all of our good deeds as followers of the Prophet ﷺ, and forgive us all of our shortcomings because we follow the Prophet ﷺ. Make us amongst those who are with the Prophet ﷺ in Jannatul Firdaus. Ameen. Oh Allah, let your blessings come upon Muhammad ﷺ and the family of Muhammad ﷺ as you have blessed Ibrahim and his family. Truly, you are the praiseworthy and the glorious. And Allah bless Muhammad ﷺ and the family of Muhammad ﷺ as you have blessed Ibrahim ﷺ and his family. Truly, you are the praiseworthy and the glorious. Ameen, ameen, ameen. Jazakallah khair, everybody. I'll finish there, inshallah. Walasr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.